Hello and welcome back to another video. This is Nate within the Mix Light and Sound, and we're trying a little tutorial. I have a couple comments talking about mixing station and some of the ways I set it up and my layouts, and a lot of it was spurred by a previous video where I put together a Waves Fit MIDI controller to a PC using Mixing Station. And one of the questions was, how do you create a touch and turn knob using a MIDI controller, or even how do you do that in Mixing Station? Because a lot of people aren't aware. And then another question I got was, how do you have the meters and faders look a specific way? So what I'm going to do in this tutorial is kind of walk through both of those. Right now I'm doing a screen capture on a dual touch screen laptop. So the layout that you're looking at is going to be my typical kind of touch screen tablet layout. And I'll kind of go through a little bit of why I set it up that way. You can see here on this mixing station, I have licenses for the Wing, the X Airs, the X32s. A lot of those are the common mixers that I come across when I'm either working contracted or if I'm bringing my own stuff. I have both Wing and X32 devices. But sometimes I'll work with bands that also have the X or M Air, so also have a license and a template for that. So let's go ahead in. So I'm not connected to any mixer here. I'm just going to go in offline mode. And right away it defaults to what my typical layout is for touch screens. So depending on the size of the screen, I may or may not have a lot of the buttons down at the bottom. But typically what I will have is a menu on the right-hand side that has my bus sends. So as I tap through this, you can see it's changing the bus sends and the layers to those sends on faders. So if I want to send to bus 3, there we go. Bus 2, channel 5, there it is. Now, one of the first things I like to do is create a master fader in addition to the regular layers here. And that's what that is. So I have quick, easy access to my left and right. And that way, as I move between buses, I also have the master fader there for the buses. So I like getting that to just see, visual for me to see what the overall level is. And that way, if something's taking off or something's happening there, I can always readjust this level. Most of the time, this is set and forget. I don't use it very often, but I just like having that nearby. There's a couple of reasons for that, especially during setup. So a lot of times when I'm ringing out monitors, what I'll try to do is, first off, I'll start the bus level down at 0. And when I get gain on a channel, let's say we're using channel 5 and that's a microphone that's coming in, I'll put that at unity send to the bus, because now what I can do is tap on that bus channel, quickly get to the EQ. And it's kind of a cheater way, but it's also a quick way to get and test as you're ringing. So when I get into the EQ screen, now, with the bus being down at the bottom, what I'll do is I'll slowly start to raise that up, and now I have the EQ at my fingertips here. So if something's taken off on me, I have the visual aid of the RTA, but also quick, easy access to be able to pull that down. So what I typically try to do is get it, as loud as I think it's needed to be, and then I'll adjust, and I always try to keep the mains at unity here. And then that way I have a reference for everything else that I'm sending to it. So just a quick way to ring out monitors, make sure you have quick, easy access to the EQ. And by having this bus main here, that allows me to quickly tap, and then I can get into the EQ and I can make any changes that I need to there. Or I can get into some of the other areas too. If I need to, have a compressor on it or an insert or anything like that, it's there and ready to go. So that's the reasoning for that. I'll also have my mute buttons. I like having a regain on, and I also like the sends on fader gains. So that way, as I'm moving things around, I can not only set the gain, but let's say that I'm getting through the night here, I'll always enable this regain and keep that on. What Mixing Station will do is with regain on, if I make any adjustments to the gain based on the parameters that you put in Mixing Station, it's going to raise or lower your thresholds for your comps. It's going to raise or lower your bus sends as well as you make an adjustment to the gain. So that way you don't have to worry about blowing somebody out because you're adjusting the gain here, messing up the monitor mix at all. So I always leave regain on. And that way, during the event, I can come in here, and if something's starting to spike on me, a guitar player turns up, I can lower the gain. And as I'm lowering that gain, it's going to raise his bus feed to keep his monitor level the same if I'm sending that guitar to the monitor. So on stage, they don't even know that I'm adjusting the gain, but that way it allows me to keep a decent gain staging here as I go along, especially as levels change throughout the night. So I like having that sends on fader gain. It's just another easier way to to adjust if you need to. And the regain is really key. And again, I have it here as a button mainly to remind myself to do it, but you can also find it under the three dots up on the top right. And in there is a section here for gain assist. And if you tap on that, now this is where if I didn't have the button there, I'd have to come here to enable or disable it. But now I can tell it, all right, here's the scope. So what do I want it to adjust when I'm changing the gain? Now I could have it automatically adjust left, right. I could have it adjust to matrices and subs. But mainly it's the monitors that I'm worried about. So typically I just leave the sends on. But again, you can set that up how you'd like. So that's an important feature of Mixing Station. One I utilize a lot is that regain feature. And the nice part is because it's built into Mixing Station, it doesn't matter what mixer I'm working on, whether it's a Wing or an X32 or an M32, I can always use that regain feature there. Next up, let's talk about the question that came up. How do you do a touch and turn knob? So what I'm going to do to show this is I'm actually going to go into layouts, and I'm going to create a whole new layout here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust this down. So I'll just use a mouse here real quick and kind of move that around. And let's add in some components here. So let's say as we're selecting a channel, we want to be able to see a view up top here. So let's go in and let's look at, say, the compressor. So now I can have a little square for the compressor. And let's do, sometimes I'll do EQ. So let's go ahead and add EQ. And then let's go ahead and add gate while we're at it. Now I'll probably change the order of these around a little bit. I kind of like following the channel order typically. So I'll have compressor over here. I'll have gate up here. And let's see, we can squeeze this down a little bit. Again, this is just for demonstration purposes here. Usually I'll leave my EQ the widest here. Comp will squeeze down just to fit on the page. Again, just for demonstration purposes here. So now that we have these parameters here, what the touch and turn process allows us to do is, a lot of times if we're, touching in an area, and let's see, how do I want to do this? I don't have a lot of screen real estate here, so let me get rid of some of those buttons. Now, normally you would want to have those in place, of course, but again, demonstration purposes. So let's say we are using this, and let's take a look at our layout. So here's the layout. Of course, I can bring up my faders and all that. And I can turn on the comp, the EQ. And if I want to make a change here, so let's say with our gate, we want to change the range. Now we got to kind of slide this for a touch screen, which is fine, but it, sometimes these knobs, because you run out of screen real estate and you try and go up and down or left and right to change them. I mean, it may be fine. But if you're using a MIDI controller, it's very nice to have an actual rotary knob to be able to tap on that range and then control it. Or if we're looking at the compression and we want to bring up, our threshold, and I can tap on threshold, and now I'm not just tied into the interface itself here with raising the threshold. I could actually use that MIDI rotary knob to make the change on it. So to demonstrate this without using a MIDI controller, you actually can create a layout environment here to create a fader or to create a touch turn knob. So again, because these are kind of small, let's say we want to do a knob, and I just want to have a big giant knob for making all of these different adjustments. So there it is. Now I can go into the settings of this, and what I want to do is I want to set a parameter here so it goes to the app current value, and that's all I have to do. So if we go back, now I tap on, let's say it's my EQ frequency. When I tap on that, oh, you know what? Let me go into the layer. So let's come out. Let's open up the layer. So if I tap on frequency, now this knob controls the frequency. If I tap on Q, now this knob will control the Q. So let's go to frequency. Let's go to gain, and let's do an extreme example here so you can see it. Because again, it's a smaller screen, but now that we do Q, we can go up, down, and this knob controls it all, right? If I want to change the threshold, and again, that's a super small knob. As long as I tap on the threshold, you can see it highlighted there. Now I can raise and lower the threshold of the compressor. So any of these, range, attack, hold, this knob will change based on what I select on this particular layer. Now, depending on the screen you're using, the knob, again, the knobs are okay over touch, but I prefer, again, having, faders, something long that I can do fine adjustments with relatively easy. So nothing says this has to be a knob. What we can do is add a fader instead. So we'll click on Add, go to General, choose Fader, and we'll go ahead and set the fader over here. Let's move this knob over. So now we have a big long fader on our template. And again, we're going to go in, hit Settings, Actions, go to App, Current Value. Now it should work the same way as that knob. So let's come out and let's open up our template. And sure enough, here it is. So let's say we want to change the attack of our gate. Now I can use this fader for more of a fine adjustment to that. And you can see the attack going up. Or again, if EQ, if I tap on frequency, you can see it moving the frequency there. Tap on the Q. I can change the width, gain. Again, we'll do an extreme example there so you can see the Q moving. Now, it doesn't work on the display itself. So if I tap here, notice that it doesn't change. It's still on Q. So you have to tap on actual physical control areas itself in order for it to work. And what's important, too, is that it's not going to follow your select. It's going to stay on the channel, on the parameter that you've last selected. So here I have channel 9 selected, and if I hit threshold here and I put this up, if I select another channel, let's select channel 4. See channel 4 threshold. If I move this, channel 4 threshold is not moving at all. But if I go back to channel 9, sure enough, that's changing. So that's something to be aware of if you use this feature. It does not follow the select. I don't know if there's a setting in Mixing Station that allows it to follow select with the channels. I think it only uses the active parameter that you tapped on for the channel that you're using. But again, that might be helpful for you. And not only can you do it on the visual display, but you can also do it in your MIDI settings. So I just, for this computer, for demo purposes, again, I have an old Nano Control hooked up to Mixing Station here. But if I go in and let's say I want to take this channel 8 knob, and right now it's assigned to channel gain. Let's say I don't want that. Let's say I want to take it and I want to go to app, current value, and that's it. So now, just like, let me go ahead and open up that layer. Hit the wrong, or that layout. So we'll open it. And now notice that this, you can't see me turning the knob, but I'm turning it on the Nano Control here. I'm turning that knob up and down, and you can see it's moving there. So now if I want to change the attack on the gate, I can do it with the knob, or change the threshold on the compressor. I can do it with the knob here. So as simple as that, just a quick little parameter, easy to use. The next thing we're going to take a look at, and I'll just do another layer here. So brand new layer. I'm going to use my mouse again to kind of scrunch all of this around. So the question was, how can I create meters and faders and different things to have them lay out the way that I have it for when I'm using my MIDI fit? So for this to work, it's actually two components that you need to do. So the first is that we want to set our channel strip to just be essentially a meter. Now we can include, all of the other items that we want to in there. So, if you want to have like your mute and stuff like that up front, you can. So now it's this custom channel strip. So again, if I close out, you'll see my channel strip is just meters. And if you're using a MIDI controller, that might be good enough, right? You might be like, this is fine. I just need to see the meters because I have the actual faders hardware in front of me. But again, I like to have that visual aid here. So now you can also change the style of the meters if you choose. So you can have them this solid continuous line here, or maybe you want them to be segmented to kind of give you a different look. So I'll come out of this custom layout, and where you want to go is under app. There's an area for metering, and then up at the top here, there's this meter style. So what I can do is choose segments, and now if I go back and open up that layout, you should be able to see that instead of solid lines, now I have segments there. So that's another way you can set up your meters there, how you want them to look. Now, how do we get faders in here? Well, that's the fun part. And this is the part that will take a little bit of time, but for me, I think it's worth it. So what I can do, I'm back into the layout editor, and we're going to go ahead into General. We're going to add a fader. We're going to move that fader and size it appropriately. I'm just going to move it on top of my meter here so that it follows along. And then what I'm going to do is, again, once I have it sized, I'm going to go into settings. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it its range, what I want it to look at. So not current channel, I want it to look at current layer, and it's going to be the first fader. So we go to main and then fader. So that'll be for the first channel. So now we have our channel level here. And then all we have to do is click on it, click duplicate, and then hit paste up at the top here. And we're going to paste an increment. And that saves some time. So now we can set this where we want over the meter. And then once again, click, copy, paste an increment, and we can continue to build it out that way. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing just for brevity here, but once we have this set, now we have our channel faders ready to go, and they're over the meters. They're automatically transparent, so that way you can have big giant meters, you can have your faders right on top of it. So those were the main items I think I got questions on, and hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight into how I use Mixing Station and some of the layouts that I create. When I'm creating my mix bus buttons here, you can see you have them on the side automatically, but what I'll usually do is I'll get rid of these, or I'll scrunch this to where I just have maybe the find button, and then I'll manually go in and add. So we have presets. We can add a busmaster channel, and that's how I get that busmaster channel over to the side. So if I'm on a send or if I'm on my mains, I have that main fader sitting there. And then I'll go in, and under presets, there is a button sends on fader. So it'll automatically send on fader 1. And then just like we did with the faders, do copy, paste an increment. There's my sends on fader 2. And then copy, paste an increment, and so on down the list. And then that way I have my sends on fader buttons right there, ready to go. So I hope this video was helpful for those of you who had some questions on the Mixing Station layouts. Again, I appreciate everybody watching, and if you haven't, please like and subscribe, and we'll keep putting out these videos. Thanks again.